What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Real Life Theology podcast. I'm your host, Regan Grace Gibbs. I am a student ministry director at my home church, Ecclesia Christian Church. I'm a social media guru and a content creator, and I love to talk about cultural hot takes and discuss them from a biblical perspective, which you're, as always, going to hear lots of on this channel. If you want to tap into my life, you can follow me across all platforms at the Regan Grace. Welcome to Gen Z On. This is a series where I interview different members of Gen Z in the church, and we talk about urgent topics of the faith. Today's topic is actually Gen Z on worship, and we're going to discuss this with two of my friends, Joel and Will, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you guys now.
Hi, I'm Joel Wilson. I'm the minister of music at Ecclesia, and I like ministering with music.
All right.
Plain and simple.
All right, so my name is Will. I am the worship pastor at the Rock Church, Conway campus. I've been doing it for a year and a half now. I've been at the Rock for 3 years. I came on as an intern and then doing creative social media stuff, and then I slowly transitioned into a worship pastor. And for some reason, they gave me that job, and I love it, and it's the best job ever. So
Love it. Okay, so we're talking about worship today. Obviously, these are some musical guys. You guys obviously, are into that world of everything. So I have a few questions just to kick off our conversation, just like a little bit of an icebreaker. First, though, I want to know, what do you play or do you sing? Like, what do you do?
So I really like music.
Okay.
So I do. I try to play everything, but my main on stage would be acoustic and singing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, I'm a vocal leader on our team too, but then I play keys and I play a little bit of acoustic guitar. I always leave it in the tracks whenever I play. So all of it is fully in there. I have a goal though, that I want to start playing with a ukulele, like a long form ukulele.
So cool.
That's my goal over the next couple, a little bit, is to learn to play that because I think it'd be cool.
My goal is banjo.
Yeah, I have a dude on our team that wants to play the banjo and the harmonica. We have someone active on our team that plays the harmonica on the worship team.
Actually, I love that.
It's so cool.
Well, you gotta have a little Southern twang because
Yeah.
we're in South Carolina.
He does though. He sounds like Zach Bryan, the guy that plays the banjo.
Actually,
so
love that.
it's cool.
Okay, so next question. Who are your favorite music artists and why? What do you love about them?
First, you should go first.
See, I think I should go last. I'm the host, so I ask you. Yeah. I'll go
Are we
last.
talking like if we weren't convicted by anything?
Okay,
if the Holy Spirit wasn't real?
If you were not, if your pastor isn't watching, saying you shouldn't listen to secular music.
All right. So right now, inspirationally, I'm a really big Gracie Abrams guy.
Okay.
Huge Gracie Abrams fan. She's one of my favorite artists of all time. I'm trying to think through who I like. I am a Taylor Swift guy through and through. Taylor Swift changed my view of music. She changed my view of songwriting. Gosh, who else am I rotating in right now? That's like, I'm trying to think not from a worship
I
song.
was saying, can we open our playlist real quick?
I
Because
stuck my
honestly,
phone in between the cushions of the couch so it wouldn't go off.
Okay.
But now I'm going to pull it
Let's
out.
see.
Let's see. I'm a big 21 Pilots guy.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd love to see them live.
I'm going live in September. We're going to see him
Oh my
in
gosh.
Raleigh. So actually, my wife made me a 21 Pilots guy. I didn't listen to them before I met her, really, and now I love them. Oh gosh, let's see. I'm a huge Olivia Rodrigo fan.
Okay.
Just anything mainstream pop.
Yeah, no,
is-
okay,
I'm
okay.
like
Justified.
I'm there. Let's see.
All right, Joel. Here's some thoughts.
Come on, Joel.
Just throw them out. Who do you listen to on the
Just
daily?
to show the difference in my music taste, I'm going to give you two artists.
Okay.
So
This is pastor
Will's
not
Will's
watching.
giving like a pop perspective.
I promise I listen to indie music too.
Please, I'm different. That's how I am.
I am different and unique.
I would say Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats.
Okay, don't even know who that
That's a
is,
big one.
but period.
Old Zach Bryan.
Okay, old reliable.
Machine Gun Kelly.
MGK? That was so out of
old
left field.
MGK or
50-50 clean versions on Spotify.
I know that's right.
there you go. You can always get the whole when an artist released the clean version of the album.
Yeah.
I'm like,
And
so
I
you're
tell you
basically
Now that's what I call music. That's always what I would listen to clean versions on.
But I tell you what's cool about talking about Taylor Swift is the fact that she completely re-records the songs.
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's not like
Yeah. So I have a hot take on her re-recording. Okay. This is Taylor's version, not re-recording the clean version. But I have a slight suspicion that and this is as someone who's a diehard Taylor Swift fan, that all of Taylor's version is the greatest marketing scheme in music industry history, and that she paid off her the guy that stole her music,
Scooter Braun.
She paid off Scooter Braun to defame him. He left with $200 million. And
didn't he just like retire from producing
he just
music?
Retired. Yeah, he made off with $200 million. And she was like, "Hey, I'm gonna smear your name through the mud, but I'm gonna pay you really well, and we're gonna re-record all this music."
Yeah, but like low key, they're like,
and they're not that they're like friends, but they're like, no, it's not what it looks like it is. That's what I think.
That's a hot take.
it would be genius.
It would be genius.
That's gonna have its own clip because we need to hear what people say about that.
Yeah,
we are gonna drop that,
and I don't care. Like, I have no problem with it because she did it, you know,
Honestly,
and we got extra music out of it. It's great.
Yeah.
I also love Hollow Coves. If I'm talking my folk music, I love Hollow Coves because I have to redeem myself from what I just said.
Oh, and Mumford and Sons.
And Mumford and Sons. There's always.
That makes me cry.
Oh Hellos. I don't know if you guys ever listened to Oh Hellos. Just some good folk music. So I had to throw that in there just so it's not all mainstream pop music.
Okay.
But
I don't know. I'm all over the place. I love worship music. If it's worship,
are you kidding me,
Reagan? But I'm gonna go there. I'm saying if it's worship music, it's Maverick City. But if it's not that, it's really gonna be like folk music or rap music. Unfortunately,
those are not even kind of the same.
No, but
it has to be one or the other.
Mumford and Sons or
we would go like.
But let me say, like, listen, Jackie Hill Perry, First Draft. I don't know if y'all
Is that
listened.
what she just dropped?
Yes,
good. I was
it
like,
was phenomenal.
wow.
It was phenomenal. Like
flow
every
was
day I've been listening to it.
crazy.
It really is. And you can totally tell she was a poet in the way
I was about to say, you can tell when someone's a poet.
You can. So love that. Little bit of Polo G in there. Like if I'm being honest.
That's what our playlist used to be like. Mumford and Sons.
Polo G.
Right. Clean version
That
though.
is just a jump.
Listen, when he did Smooth Criminal, like the remix of Smooth Criminal, when he did the sample, the clean version was going crazy.
So who do you think is the greatest Christian rapper of all time? Let me ask you that.
It's not Andy Mineo. Let me say it. It's not.
What do you have against Neverland? Come on.
I just, you know what? You know why? Because I've heard Coming in Hot so many times that I have to resent him as
It's
an
like
artist.
on Taco Bell now. Did you see that commercial?
Yeah, and we just went to a recital and they did it, and I was literally like, no.
They play Coming in Hot at a recital?
And I understand
what
why,
type of
because
Oh, right.
like violins, they're like Coming in Hot. But that's the thing. I feel like I've heard it so many times that anytime I hear Andy Mineo, I'm like, no. Christian rapper.
I mean, didn't
Oh my gosh.
Kardashian like post it?
Something like that.
Like it's just
Something like
And
that.
so we're back to Kanye.
I do like. Okay, I like Paul Russell. I do feel like
I don't know
he
who
did
that
music
is.
with Bruce Lawn.
I like Ruslan.
Okay, I like them. I think they're good. I also like. There was somebody I was listening to the other day. Okay, Monty J. I enjoy him a lot. He's a Christian rapper. I think he's pretty good. And if I had to pick another artist, Noah Kahn is always
for
going to
sure.
be just up there. And
Honestly,
Have you heard his song with Gracie Abrams?
Yeah,
But
I was literally gonna
his
say, can
song,
we talk
I mean,
about that?
It's not like a collab. It is, but it's like his song.
there's
with her,
not
but
there's not a Noah Kahn song I haven't heard.
he's so. I think so. They were both up for Best New Artist at the Grammys, which neither of them won. So that's
Yeah,
its own thing.
unfortunately.
But I was like, both of them. He is one of the most unique artists I think that is putting music
is.
out right now. Now he's obviously like super blown up. So but
I was gonna say, if we're gonna go down that rabbit hole of a celebrity that rose to fame too quickly, I don't want to hear Noah Kahn's name mentioned.
no, I just think people just like good writing.
He's been out there for a while, and you can even Summer's here. She was like one of his fans in like 2016.
Really?
She will go down the pipeline of how he rose to fame, and she will not go with the argument. She says, "I was there for every moment of his rise to fame." Yes.
That's so cool.
Okay, so back to the podcast. Sorry, we went on a whole side conversation about Noah Kahn. As you can see, we have a lot of fans in the room. And so we just got a little sidetracked. So now we're actually going to get back to the podcast. So let's just get into it, like straight into it. And one thing I'm excited for is I love hot takes. Will said he loves hot takes. And so for me, this is going to be a lot of fun because y'all are the worship leaders, the worship ministers, pastors. I'm just the podcast host. I get to ask all the crazy questions and let y'all deal with them. And hopefully,
tell you if you can post it.
hopefully some of your team
Scratch the
watches
episode.
this and they get to hear you guys talk about these things. So we had a brief discussion kind of getting ready for this podcast, just going over things, talking about different things. And we were talking about whether or not there is a straight structured model in scripture given to us for worship, because there's a lot of controversy over worship, like contemporary worship, modernized worship, and then traditional worship, and seeing people saying, oh, well, the modernized worship isn't worship, or the traditional worship isn't worship, and saying that neither are really adequate worship. So do you guys think there is a straight structure, like a specific model given for worship in scripture?
Would you like to start that, or do you want me to start?
You
that?
start it how you did it.
Okay. So I think there is 100% a model given for worship biblically. And if we look at Romans, it says, present your body as a living sacrifice. This is your true and proper worship. And so I think to begin any sort of conversation about worship, we have to start there, because it's a New Testament definition of what the word is. We go through and we see a lot of musical worship in the Old Testament, but you don't see as much of it in the New Testament. So I think to clarify a definition, starting there is a great place to begin the conversation. And then I think there's different forms of worship. I think so by that definition, anything I do that requires me to present my body as a sacrifice for the Lord daily is worship. Worship is different than what, we kind of, we see us get up on stage with a guitar and we're like, oh yeah, they're worshiping. I want to be on the worship team. I want to lead worship, but the best way you can lead worship is to lay your life down daily for the Lord. So I think to begin a conversation, that's not the end of the conversation. Obviously, it's just a segue into all right, now we can talk about what are the different areas that you do, worship through that.
Staff, we get to see all the different areas of worship.
Absolutely.
Ushering people into the parking lot to the auditorium, people at the coffee bar, they're worshiping.
And I think that's an interesting perspective to see. And actually, Bailey, who was on this last week, just did a post for our church on our social media, and it was like a reel, and it was this is worship, and it was a picture of the worship team. Then it was every different area of the church, and it said, but so is this.
It was great.
And I think that's interesting that a lot of people take worship as only being I don't want to say the word performance, but doing something on a stage. I mean, there have been times that I've seen, being behind the scenes, like you talked about, people say, oh, I want to be on the worship team because my gift is worship. And we'll say, you know what, but there's so many other areas. So maybe this isn't what you're called to do. Maybe this isn't for you, but look at another area and they'll say, oh, no, but my calling is worship. But what isn't worship when you're doing it for God?
And I think we've categorized worship into one thing.
Right.
Like you're saying, we need to be able to tell everyone, serving with kids ministry is worship, because you're a worship leader at heart.
Right.
And I don't think you feel any different now on stage versus speaking to the kids on
Well,
stage,
and that's, I was on our worship team for a long time, for years of my life. And recently I transitioned into student ministry now. My Sunday mornings are dedicated to being with students. Yeah. And so for the month of June, we did student takeover. So that looked like sitting with our students while the main worship team or while the student worship team led worship. And for me, I feel no different on a Sunday morning sitting in the congregation worshiping with the students that I minister to throughout the week than I do worshiping on stage in front of people. Because for me, me having a microphone does not elevate my worship to Christ in any way. It doesn't, my worship is not determined on, by where I am. Yeah. So I feel just as connected to God, sometimes even more, sitting in the audience or sitting with people that I love, sitting with people that I'm connecting with and growing with, worshiping to God, than when I'm on stage doing it with a microphone or with a bass in my hand. So,
and that's a thought too, your worship now might not be what your worship is in 3 years.
Right.
Yeah, seasonal ministry is
and that,
for sure.
Huge. Tiffany Hudson posted, I don't know if you follow her.
No, but I know who you're.
But she posted the other day, she did a quick, she just had a baby too.
Oh,
and,
congrats.
She posted just a quick Q&A thing. And somebody was like, oh, how did you get to where you're at now? And somebody like her, who I would say is one of the top worship leaders in the world right now. She even said oh, I don't know if I'll be doing this in 5 years. The Lord might call me to serve in another area. Stuff like that. But you got to have that openness of, I might not be on stage in 3 years. I might be doing something. Because I feel if I would have asked you 2 or 3 years ago, you said, no, I'm doing this forever.
Yeah.
Well, if Jesus' ministry was seasonal, why wouldn't ours be?
Right.
When you think that, and that he was doing the same thing, but he was in different places doing it his entire ministry.
Right.
So he gave us the model for what that looks like.
Right, for sure. So we're kind of talking about the fact that all service to Christ should be worship. If it's something that you're giving as a gift to God, that's your act of worship. And the fact that worship shouldn't be exclusive to being on stage or having a microphone or having an instrument. And I think that another thing that we should talk about is because worship, especially on stage, is such a, I don't want to say this, but it can become such a time-consuming commitment to the church. I think that people lose sight of the fact that you should be consistently fed just as much, if not more, than you are serving. Because, worship is doing something on stage, but honestly, it's an outpouring. It's a ministry. You're ministering to others, whether you're singing or playing an instrument. That is ministering to the people in the congregation. So you can't pour out in that ministry when you're not being fed just as much. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think first and foremost, like, you're not being fed if you're not in time with the Lord on your own by yourself.
Right.
To go in a step further, like, if I'm not having time with the Lord, that's also has nothing to do with my wife. Like, it can't be us to get, the Lord is extremely personal. And I think if I'm not having time with him, and there's so much more building blocks to go into that, but it starts with a personal time in his word and in prayer on my own. And that's, no one else is responsible for your spiritual well-being. Like, that's a you thing, you know? And, I think it really does begin there. And then you can build into, all right, am I in community? Am I in accountability with other people? Am I, because that's part of being fed. Am I reading the word with people that I love and praying with people I love? Am I sitting under the leadership of my pastor as he preaches on Sunday morning? I think those things are super building blocks onto that. But to be truly fed, because, the word is alive, it's active, it's our daily bread.
Right.
It's not for tomorrow, it's not for yesterday, it's for today.
Right.
And so I think starting there is how you stay full and rested.
And I've been guilty of that too. We literally were just talking about, like, Sundays are you get so tired.
Yeah.
And I was telling him, like, I've been able to kind of join Matt's, like, not writing team, but like collaboration moments, like, hey, what could fit in this sermon? And I told him, like, on Sundays sometimes it feels like I've heard this message before, so I don't have to sit in it, I already know it, and that's, like, not a good space to be in, because, like, it's hard, it's so easy to associate, especially on staff, worship with work.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes.
That. And I figured we'll probably go into that later too.
Right,
but
for sure.
But, like, you can lead worship and you're like, all right, I need to take a break. Like, I'm done, until the next service.
Right.
And, like, truthfully, I had to force myself, get your butt in that auditorium.
Sit down.
Right.
Like, sit down and take this in.
Yeah.
Because when I'm leading up there, I am sometimes being fed, but, like, I have to get recharged before the next service.
Right.
And that is sitting down and listening to a message. And we talk a lot about sitting in service at our church, and it's like, sitting in a service, to me personally, looks like sitting in a seat with the congregation, Bible out, taking notes.
I agree. It's not on your laptop or your phone.
Like, I can't sit there on my phone. Like, I'm not getting nothing.
Right, because I'm going to swipe up and I'm going to start doing something else.
Right.
Yeah, and that's definitely something. I mean, you have to kind of cultivate that in the relationships around you, because, I mean, if you're with people who are like, nah, man, I sat in the Thursday service,
It's different service.
Right, you're not going to feel it's not going to feel as necessary to you. Yeah. So you have to also surround yourselves with people who have that same conviction. And I think you guys understand that we all got married at pretty young ages.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So we're all kind of like, and we're all still in the newer phases of, like marriage and stuff like that. You guys have a son that's about to turn 1. You guys are expecting.
It's a raspberry. It's the size of a raspberry.
But I tell you what, too. We've talked about this a lot. You have to be hungry for it, number one.
Yeah.
Because if I'm convinced that I'm fed already, I'm not going to get nothing out of something.
Right.
Right.
And that's something good old Dr. Orpheus taught us weeks back. But like, you're not going to get nothing out of it if you're convinced that you're full already.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, I prayed this morning. I'm plenty spiritually charged.
Right.
Up, but if you're mentally like, I should be hungry 24/7 to soak in more info.
Right.
And that mindset switch for me has changed everything to where, goodness, I could sit in a Sunday service like every day right now because I'm craving it.
Right.
Well, regardless of what you feel, the Word of God shows that manna is spoiled the next day.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like, if you can go into the perspective of even like, let's say I don't eat it all today. I could think I'm fine. My body's going to start to shut down, because I need the nutrients and I need it. Right. And I know I just said it a second ago, but the Word of God is daily bread. Right. That's what Jesus prays, give us today our daily bread. today. I don't need tomorrow's word today.
Right.
You know what I mean? I need today's word today. And I think that perspective of like, even if I don't feel it, because there's so many days I don't want to get in the word. You know what I mean? It's just
Tomorrow's
the
word
truth.
is for tomorrow.
It's for tomorrow. I need to get in the word today. And that might not be I'm sitting in the word for 2 hours today. It may be I do what I need to do to get through today, but I know I need the word. You know, and then to help feed that hunger.
20 words well.
Right. Yeah, that's something. So that's something that they, do a lot in discipleship at our church is they have like these different methods. You start with something called like the 5-5-10, and then it builds up to like 10-10-20, 20-20, 40. But the model of it is you spend 5 minutes reading. You spend 5 minutes reading.
Journaling.
And then you spend 10 minutes like in prayer, talking to God about it. So then when when you start that out, it feels like, 20 minutes a day, like that's a lot of time. But I've learned, and we've learned through doing it, once you start, you're like, that's not enough.
Yeah.
I need more time to read because I want to go further. I need more time to talk to God because this 10 minutes isn't enough. So I think it's important to have methods like that in your life that, especially starting out, they kind of keep you grounded. And that's what I was saying. I think it's important to have accountability in doing that. So, talking about, us all entering new seasons, having to make sure that the people you're surrounding yourselves with, even who you go home with at the end of the day, are just as accountable to being fed consistently as you are. Because there are a lot of times that, at the end of a Sunday, Sunday's the day of rest. So I get home, I'm like, I'm going to bed for the rest of the day. Yeah. And Manny will have to be like, no, like.
I don't remember if you told me that personally or if that was on a podcast or like Manny called you out the other day.
Yeah.
Like, you could say it, but like you were talking about like you got home and you were creating a lesson is what you're doing.
Yeah.
He was like, well, did you read personally today?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. Did you get in the word on Sunday?
Right. And I'm sitting there, I'm like
That's
writing
hard.
a lesson for students on Thursday night. And I'm like, all right, I'm tired, I'm going to sleep. And he's like, you didn't read your Bible. I was like, yeah, but I've been writing lessons. Like I wrote 3 lessons today. So like
I've been a different mindset.
Right. And I've been like, I'm in the Bible. He's like, yeah, but you weren't reading it for you. You were reading it for them.
That's huge.
You need to get in it for you. And I was like, dang, all right. And so I know every night.
I think it's annoying sometimes.
Listen, it does, but I need it. And so we're talking about, right, at the end of the day, I know every single night, this is just like what works for us. We have a balcony. He's going to go out there on the balcony. He's going to read. He's going to pray. I'm going to sit in our room. I'm going to read. I'm going to pray. And we're not going to reconvene. Yeah. We're not going to even get in bed for the night until we've both done those things because that's accountability and that's important. And if I'm not, holding him accountable to being in the word every day, spending time with God every day, being fed, and if he's not doing that for me,
somebody's going to fall.
Right. And when one of us falls, I can't pick you back up on my own. You have to have that accountability to God. So I think that's very important. Being fed just as much as you're serving. So we also talked about, and this is going to be a hot take. So this one's going to be, I want to hear y'all's thoughts on this. Like we talked about before with the modernized worship and the traditional worship, it's a very big thing right now for people to say in modern churches, church is a production or church is like a concert. And like, it's always the smoke and light show. It's always the smoke and light show. And I always see, I'm in these Facebook local groups and people are always like, recommend a church, all capitals, not a concert, looking for a chill church. And I'm like, I ain't gonna say mine because you don't want to be. You don't want to be.
Don't want to come.
And so that's a big thing. And we'll dive into this. I can see both sides of the spectrum, but just from a worship ministry standpoint, for people that lead these areas, I know that in most churches, in most cases, the worship minister or worship pastor is typically involved in the production aspect of things as well, because that's how ministry works. You're kind of doing like multiple different things. So I'm sure you guys have or are in tune as well, or else work closely with the people that do your production side of things. So looking at it from that perspective of worship and production being almost like a production, but still being authentic, what are you guys' thoughts in regard to that and sort of the controversy around it that people like to argue about a lot now?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Anyways, so I won't go too deep because I like where you are going to go with it. Mm-hmm. So my scenario with this was, because we're talking Gen Z on,
right?
Which are we Gen Z?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we've made it.
Okay,
we made it.
So
I think it's like 26 and up or something
so
like
an old
well,
man.
that doesn't it doesn't really change what generation you were born in. So,
so my thoughts on it are not really pro or against any of that, but like the fact that we could be so versatile. And we've talked before about like We've done worship in the round with just we're doing one Friday.
Yeah.
Where we're not even doing worship in the round. We're just bringing an acoustic and doing worship on the beach.
Literally just sitting there.
And then also we've done night 0, which was just nothing held back.
The most insane production you could possibly put on.
For me personally, I think neither of them are better than the other.
No.
I think we get just as spiritually fed in this scenario as we do this one. For me, I feel like our generation looked up to the church that did the cool stuff.
Right.
Because a lot of us grew up in that small town, like home churchy feel, and we wanted to be like, wait, but Elevation's doing this, and I want to see what it's like. But now we work in that.
And we talked about this too, like we grew up in pews.
Yeah.
Like we didn't get to experience this. So for us watching church evolve into something like this, I feel like the worldly side of me growing up it's what kept me excited. Like this is cool every Sunday. And because I don't know, I feel like you said before, like if the world's doing it, why can't the church do it too?
And I think
not that we're supposed to be like the world.
Right. But that's, we're talking about in a lot of ways within churches, people want to know how can we do things in avenues that reach the world, but for people for the sake of Christ. And so we talked about the idea that, doing these things to incorporate smoke or whatever it is. It's literally haze, but people want to say smoke, like all that.
Which I didn't realize. I didn't realize till recently. The reason you do it is to catch the light.
Yeah.
I found that out recently. Super
No, it's just for the mysterious vibe.
I thought it was for the aesthetic,
It's just
and
for
it's
the vibe.
not. It catches the light.
Yeah.
So if anyone didn't know that, that's why you use fog in your church.
Purpose.
So it doesn't. It's not just like a swamp.
Could you go into your own piece?
Oh yeah. So also for us, we are like one of the very few churches that has 2 different people in worship and production. So I am one half of a whole role at the Conway campus. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So Cade is a really awesome guy.
And our production person is Cadence.
Yeah. So it's super interesting. He does a great job, and he and I work hand in hand. But I think what we talked about the other day whenever we met was just a huge part of it, I think, is creativity and creative expression. And I think that's such a beautiful thing because we were talking about how the first thing we ever learn about God and his character is that he's creative. Before we learn that he's holy or righteous or good or loving or kind or anything, the Bible tells us that he's creative. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It's the first attribute we learn. So I think that's like, if we believe that we're made in his image, then we're creative. I believe every human is innately creative, and that looks different for everybody. But I think when a heart posture is right, the lights and the beams and the colors and the fog and the stage layout is just another way to be creatively expressive, is what I think. But I also think the second that your heart posture is wrong, it does become a performance, and it can be very performative and distracting. Like anytime that something is distracting away from the presence of the Lord and the glory of the Lord, it's a problem,
For sure.
Now, in a room of 500 people across 4 services, 12, I don't know, 200, whatever, 2,000 is the word I was trying to say. 2,000 people in a weekend. Someone's probably going to get distracted. But so I don't mean that like, at face value. But I think when something is overtly distracting, no creativity is ever worth distraction from the Lord.
Right.
But I think when you have a humble posture, I think the lights are great. I think a room with just an acoustic guitar and a cajon with no lighting and no microphone is also awesome.
Right.
But that could also be a massive performance if you want people to hear you and see you, and could be just as much of a problem.
Right.
I think it all comes back to heart posture. And which of those is you living as a living sacrifice?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it could be either one could be a show, either one could be a sacrifice.
Right. And something that Will shared when we talked about this was, he said the fear in doing those things is becoming dependent on those resources that should be a source of creativity. So, if we can't do a service without having to have lights or without having to have, an entire sound system, that's what's dangerous. I mean, there have been times a few years ago we had a service and we had a chili cook-off happening. I don't know if churches that are not in South Carolina do that, but
I won one time.
Really?
That's actually impressive because around here, that's like, they get competitive. So we actually do have things called like chili cook-offs, and they just compete
I won that
make
thing.
chili. So anyway,
White chicken chili.
So
Send me the recipe.
we literally
so good.
had in service, we had a chili cook-off happening in the lobby. But in service, everyone came in, so all their crock pots were plugged in the lobby. our power went out in the middle of service
You had a
because
crock pot outage?
because of the crock pot outage. There were so many crock pots plugged in that our service
I love South Carolina.
power went out. Okay. So we're like all looking at each other. We all just put down our instruments. Our whole team just starts singing the songs acoustic. No lights on.
Drums, and we like all left our stations.
Yeah.
And, like went to the front of the station.
I like
just,
set down the bass.
All sing melody.
We're just clapping and singing with people, and the whole church was standing up doing it. And you know what? That, even though it was years ago, to me, is still one memory I look back on and say, our church was so connected with no resources.
Yeah. Amen.
And that's
it
where
was like it didn't even stop.
right. It just kept going. We finished the worship set. We went into a whole nother song. And so that's what I look at and think, you know, we were able to use those creative avenues, but our worship was not dependent on those. And I think that's what's important.
I agree. I think that's huge.
And also, I mean, I remember a time where like we were only doing Sunday service in an auditorium, and I think we went to a camp and led worship, and we realized like, oh, we can't play without a clicking guide right now. And like now we like force ourselves to try back and forth, like, all right, let's do worship in here tonight and try what this is like. It's because like it's so easy in the worship world to become dependent on certain things.
For sure.
For me, this is one I can't get out of is lyrics. I have to have lyrics everywhere, dude.
I think if you're asking a volunteer to work a 40-hour week, sometimes 50-hour week, then come in and devote 7 hours on a Sunday morning, it's okay to provide lyrics for them to read off of.
And I'm a full-time staff member for worship, and I still
literally.
Yeah. So I think something that we talked about that I fully agree with is the fact that the majority of Gen Z is willing to be very versatile with their worship. And we talked about, my mom is on staff here. My mom, if she comes in and sees like Night Zero, we talked about being a crazy production. She talks about it today. Yeah. She literally like loved it. She loved seeing that we had that avenue for students. If she comes in and sees, you know, our students doing like a around the circle, you know, acoustic set, she'd be like, okay, cool. But, you know, we have a huge auditorium with LED wall with lights, because she grew up in that sort of like backwoods, really small traditional setting. And so for her, she's like, we have these resources, why not utilize them?
Right.
So for her generation, they look back on that like the old days, and they're like, this is what we can do. And then the generation that is still very stuck in that, they look at this and see it as people are trying to modernize something that doesn't need to be modernized. Why not just strip worship down and keep it as it is? And I think with us, a lot of us have the perspective of, and I know that each of us can speak to this, growing up in a church setting that was advancing in a time without having all of those resources. So, you know, like being in a smaller church setting, having more of like a traditional setup, and now working in this, I value just as much, you know, the giant worship service as I do the sitting with an acoustic guitar. And I think that that's something that's common for a lot of Gen Z. As long as it's authentic, they'll worship in either of the settings. Yeah. And so I think that that's a difference from a lot of other generations, because they are very stuck in this or this, and they like to be comfortable. And that's, you know, that's one thing. But for us, I think it's really like, I will show up to a church service, don't know what we're doing, put me in there with other people, and I'm going to worship, because that's literally like, I don't care what we're doing. I just know who we're worshiping. And I think that that's something different about Gen Z, is that we're pretty versatile in that.
Yeah.
That's good.
And talking about your mom's generation. So like Pastor Matt is such a visionary, like he grew up in that pew setting as well. And the church he led at was all pews. And I remember like he had his own building in the back for the students and stuff. And it was like the first time talking about us growing up and seeing like the cool stuff. He would like, and it was like so low budget. Yeah. It was so cool. Like he would have haze machines in there. And I remember being like, wait, this is like what church is going to be. This is what I want to be a part of. Like, this is so cool. And I think that generation, the reason they're still so excited about it is because that's what grew the church. Yeah. Is like excitement to it, bringing like, no, we're not just going in here and singing the doxology 4 times and preaching a 20-minute sermon and leaving. Like, no, we're going to worship, but we're going to have a great time too, you know?
And it's going to be an environment for people that felt looked over before. Yeah. You know, I think that's also another thing of like the way we, you know, our two churches, at least I'm not going to speak for other people, but I can speak for us, like kind of function is there's people that never would have stepped foot in the door of the church otherwise.
Right.
That now they're like, oh, this isn't, I'm gonna give this a shot. This isn't there. I don't know. I just think it really opens up the door.
And not
literally.
And not even production, like it changed the way people dress at church.
Oh my goodness.
Like, dude, we would not wear this at church 30 years ago.
No, I show up to church
Stitch
hoping
socks.
people wonder. No, I literally want people to be like, is she homeless or no?
Yeah.
I want them
Like,
to.
it's just
I want them to have to question
like
it.
Joel Houston. Do you watch Hillsong?
No, not a whole lot.
Like looks like very. I don't know if I should say that. I
Bruh.
was gonna say he looks like they just pulled him off the street.
No, but like I want
it's
people
like
to
the
wonder if
style
my
for
clothes
worship
are
leaders.
from like a thrift store or urban.
Did you listen to I was listening to the Perrys yesterday, and she was talking about Preston. She just dogs him, and she was like, you don't look homeless, but you don't look like you can read. And I'm like,
good,
that's
that's
what a compliment.
Yeah,
like
right.
that's what I want to be. I don't want to look. If I look homeless, that's
crazy.
fine. But I want to look like I can't read.
And
You know,
also like
church should be filled with people that look they
the
can't read.
lights are too hot for us to wear full blown suits.
They really.
And
are.
I'm not making. I'm not. I was about to say. I'm not saying this to make a joke, but the LED wall raises the temperature of your room by like 15
Yes.
degrees.
The other day, Will said if you stand directly in front of the LED wall, it feels like your face is like melting off.
It does.
And I was like,
It's
no,
so
it truly
hot.
does.
And
Worship leaders are getting air fried every Sunday.
No, but here's the thing. I never felt that until about a month ago. So I don't know if our LED wall's about to like blow up or what's about to happen. I didn't feel it before, and now our whole band complains about it now. So I don't know what's about to happen there. But
Yeah,
There is that.
But I think just talking about all of that in general is just, I think that there's an equal balance that you have to have kind of in excellence, but also intimacy.
Yes.
So, being able to put on something excellent, but also being intimate with the members of your church and introducing them to worship in an intimate way, because I can feel just as intimate in my worship with 3 people as I do sitting in a Sunday morning service. But if someone is not introduced to intimacy in worship, they can just walk in on a Sunday with 1,000 people and a huge service going on and be like, oh, okay, what do I even do? Literally don't even know what to
overwhelming.
do. Yeah, it can be overwhelming. So
And that's
Definitely.
the thing, like, keep the excellence, but also be understanding.
Right.
Yeah, no, I get that this
For
can be
sure.
awkward to somebody that walks in that's never seen a church like this. And so I'm not like, I think it is wrong for people who are like, no, this is how we do it. You suck it up and sit in the
Yeah.
service. Like, no, that's not
right, because then you
like,
slip into arrogance too. It's like, all right,
and that's,
Right.
you've got to have that heart posture to know, like, this is different for people that have been in pews their whole
Right.
life. Like, but give
takes time.
It's really
Right.
fun. Like,
yeah,
trust
it is
me.
fun.
yeah. So I think that Gen Z just typically across the board seems to have a willingness to worship in most atmospheres as long as it's authentic. And so the next question I had was, for you guys as leaders of these ministries and these teams, I think that this is something that a lot of people overlook because, like you said, people are volunteering. Someone who is on your worship team most of the time is not staff. And sometimes, like in our case, you'll have other staff members who rotate on the worship team, but that's also not their job. But typically, within the church, it's volunteers. People are serving without the week, which I love, or throughout the week, which I love. And I think that's very valuable to have that culture in your church. But they are still serving as someone leading on a stage, on a platform. So typically when someone in the congregation comes in, they see someone on the stage and they don't think, oh, that's Joe who works at, I don't know, the 7-Eleven, but he's also really good at music, so he serves at church on Sundays. They're thinking, oh, he leads worship at the church.
He represents ecclesia.
He represents the church. So it is, in my opinion and my thoughts, good and right to have expectations for anyone who is using a platform at your church in any area. And we have that even in our student ministry. Typically it's me or my husband Manny speaking on the stage, or someone else who's one of our leaders. But even our small group leaders, they have to go through our class to understand the church, what we teach, why we teach it. And then we have to talk about, do we align? Do you understand? Do you have any questions? And we have to communicate that thoroughly, because I'm not going to just throw someone into a leadership role, talking to students, guiding them through one of the most transformative times of their life when they're making decisions that impact the rest of their life. I'm not going to put just anyone in that role who is talking to them throughout the week, discipling them, if I'm not sure that they're going to be solid and mentor those students in a God-honoring way. So it's the same thing with worship. You guys have that obligation to monitor almost who you're putting on the platform. And I want to know, what do you guys, how do you guys kind of go about that? The expectations that you place. Some people say oh, this church tried to make me do this to be on their worship team. That's too much. So I know that that's a hot take, and a lot of people who are not on staff, they wouldn't understand that. So I want to hear you guys' thoughts on that, and sort of, what sort of expectations you guys think are necessary for someone that's leading on a platform in a church?
Yeah, I think it being volunteer. Your team's all volunteers, right?
For the majority.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Getting a phone call.
So
Majority.
I feel like for me, the worship team being volunteers, I feel like they have a purer heart in the services because like they've sacrificed a lot of time to be here today, and like we have weekday rehearsals for our team, and for me it fills my heart so much to see like you just got off work and you're here at 5 o'clock, and some people have to you had to call out early to be at rehearsal tonight, and I feel like at rehearsals we worship together as a team because nobody's in the church, and it's just so pure to see like these are tired adults that could be on the couch asleep right now, but they're choosing to be here to give their time to the church, and then Sunday morning call time, man, like that's hard for me.
What's your call time on Sunday mornings?
6:45.
6:45?
But y'all don't do weekday rehearsal.
No, we don't have a weekday rehearsal.
Okay, that makes more sense.
And it's not a rehearsal, it's a run through.
Okay,
is what
that
we
makes
call
sense.
it.
Okay.
I mean, so I try to get there. I have people showing up at 6:20, 6:30, ready to plug in.
Well, at least they're
sacrifice, and I think the fact that it's volunteer led encourages me so much, is because I don't know, it's just a sacrifice, and it to me it makes worship that much more pure on a Sunday service.
Yeah. Well, I was about to complain about our 8 o'clock call time, but now I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I literally was so early.
6:45, 6:30, 6:45, somewhere along there. Yeah, it's extremely early. Yeah. I think for us, we have an onboarding process that we always go over whenever you are starting the worship team.
Right.
There's a process you have to go through.
Right.
Sometimes it's 2 auditions, sometimes 1, just kind of depending on the circumstance. And then we have a handbook, the worship team handbook.
Right.
It is set in stone. We're working through revising it because there's some stuff we got to add. But yeah, I'll send you out so you can look at it. So, you take the handbook, I sit down. I've really been working on revising this onboarding process over the past year. And so I'm learning and I'm gathering things. But right now, what it looks like is you take a sit down after your audition. We talk through the handbook. I give it to someone. I say, all right, I'm going to send you this. You take it home, sit in it. It has our statement of beliefs as a church in it. It has our dress code in it, call times, information about being prepared, and everything you would need, to be held accountable for something. Because I don't mind if people have open-handed issues they disagree with the church on, as long as the closed-handed stuff, which is all listed out very explicitly our statement of beliefs as a church, not a worship team, but a church, is in there. And then there's a little thing on the back page that says, I have read and agree everything in this handbook. And so I give it to them. I'm like, sit in this, read it. Because at the end of the day, hey, we're in the ministry of people. We're in the ministry of love. Now and love looks different for a lot of people, but that's what ours looks like. And then I tell them, I'm like, hey, if you don't agree with anything in this after you sit them, I want you to know there's no judgment. There's no bad feelings. It's totally fine. It just is a prerequisite for being able to step onto the team. And I really try to communicate with that, because there may be people that find a home at the Rock that don't agree with everything of our statement of beliefs, I would encourage people probably it's probably a good idea to attend somewhere where no, I want them at the Rock, but
That's funny.
But
just tell them to come over here.
Just, don't worry, it's us or y'all.
One or the other. Go to church somewhere on 501.
That's crazy.
Beside the cookout.
Right.
No, it's both of them.
Oh my gosh.
That is true.
We're both right beside cookout.
But I really try to communicate that it's totally fine. This is still your home. We are still your community, but it's a prerequisite. So that's kind of, there's some upfront stuff that really, and like I said, that includes dress code. It really tries to prevent things up front. And so that is part of what goes into our, hey, you're on stage. This isn't really extra. I try to communicate it's not more important, but it is a different, higher level of responsibility. Right? Because it's not more important than any other position at our church, but you're on stage in front of, And
I think a lot of people come in with that, oh, they're on stage. And for some reason in people's minds, that registers them almost as a higher authority than any other serving team. But because they're on that stage, they're having a microphone, it kind of in people's minds sets a precedent oh, the church lets them on stage.
I tell you something I've been telling my new audition people is you might not have this now, but once you're on this stage, you will have that random person that's hurting, hey, can I talk to you? You don't have that yet, but when that hits, I've got to know that we're telling them the right
Yeah,
stuff.
you are now a counselor. You're now
you're
For sure.
a friend to all at
Right.
this point, and they're going to talk to you about things. And
Yeah.
I got to make sure you're not telling them some
Right.
wacky stuff.
Right.
Dude.
And I think that also comes into play. Being on a worship team, being on a team that is on stage comes with, and I think this is something that you guys, like you're saying, have to present to people on your team, comes with a level of accountability.
100%.
And
Oh,
that's
my
accountability to not only God, but to the church family. I mean, like Joel said, I did worship for a very long time before I did student ministry. And there was a time previously, Joel was not our worship leader at the time. I came in weekly. There was a time I think I played bass for 2 years and didn't take a Sunday off.
Ooh.
Yeah. And no, I had no qualm with that. I was the only bass player, but I was the bass player. And, you know, there was a time I came in and I was getting ready for a Sunday service. It was our weekly rehearsal. You know, the worship leader was like, hey, I need to talk to you about something. Didn't pull me aside alone. It was with my friends. And Summer, who is behind the scenes here, can actually attest to this. He was like, listen, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I'm going to be honest with you. Your clothes that you're wearing on stage, they're too tight. You can't lead and wear that. And, you know, at the time, I'm like a 17, 16-year-old girl. And I'm like, boy, you don't know what you're talking about. Don't be talking to me about what I wear. But then I went home and I had to sit with it. And I was like, you know what? When I get dressed in the morning, I know what I'm putting on is tight. And I'm not thinking when I get on stage, you know, like, oh, I'm going to wear something tight. Like, you know, but I also know, I can feel the fact that what I'm putting on is tight. And I had to really sit with that and be like, you know what? If what I'm doing is a sacrifice, then I would not want to. I mean, I'm not going to go to the dog park and then, you know, wave a bone in front of the mouth of every other person's dog, you know? And that's what was hard for me to come to terms with was, if I'm doing this for God, then I have to be willing to be uncomfortable with myself.
Ooh.
I have to be willing to set aside things for myself that I want to do, because me getting up and leading worship is not about me. It's not about what I like to wear or what I want people to see, how I want to be perceived. I have to be uncomfortable for the sake of giving God the best sacrifice I can possibly give. And that honestly led into me changing a lot of, you know, just the style of what I wear in general. And honestly, it opened an entire door for me to be able to change a lot. And it actually, believe it or not, I mean, what you wear literally can connect you to so many people. It's so
gracious,
wild. Yeah. And it allowed me to change different things, to become more comfortable in who I was, but also to connect with so many more people. In our student ministry, there are so many of our students who are sort of like indie or like edgy, and they're literally like, Miss Reagan, you have the coolest outfits. And I'm like, girl, you would not have liked me a few years ago. But I'm literally able to connect with them over something like that. And it's like, you know what? Had someone not been honest and accountable to me in that conversation of saying, you know what, you're representing Christ, you're representing our church. And had I not been accountable to them and willing to make a small change to be a little bit uncomfortable, I would be stuck in those ways and not willing to do some of the sacrifice for God, but also not being able to connect with people on different levels in different ways because of a small sacrifice to God. And I truly believe that God does bless those sacrifices. So because I was willing to be a little bit sacrificial with him in this area, he's like, you know what, but I'm going to make it count. I'm going to make it worth something. Amen. And so I think that when we're willing to be sacrificial with God, he does bless that. But I think to be on one of those teams, you have to have a certain level of accountability and willingness to receive accountability. Because if, you know, Joel has had to come to me before and say, like, you know, like we said, I'm all about the hot takes. He's like, listen, this one was a little bit too much. And if you're on this team, like, you got to take that down.
But I tell you what, too, they don't tell you that when you sign up. That there is more hard conversations than anything else. But if you have that relational equity with your team,
right?
It's so like, just do it with love. Don't.
My goodness, because ministry of love.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And so like to telling somebody like, hey, you can't wear that today. That's hard. I tell you another one is like, your attitude stinks.
Yeah.
Like, why are you being a jerk back here right now? And but if you have that relationship with somebody, they can be like, oh yeah, you know, let me go grab another shirt. Let me go change real quick. They're so much more open to that. I had a hard conversation a year or two ago, and it was just asking somebody like, hey, what's going on? You're not yourself today. You're kind of being rude to the team. And dude, it was just, I've had a horrible week. You know, I shouldn't have. Dude, we prayed together and everything changed. But dude, if I didn't check in on that guy weekly, like, he wouldn't have told me nothing. Like, I have no, Matt likes to call it chips. Like, you're collecting chips with everybody. Like, you can't take something out of somebody if you've not poured into it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Right,
So,
for sure.
And it's like, how are you going to go to somebody and tell them they can't wear what they're wearing when you haven't asked them about their spiritual health throughout the week?
You gotta lay it
know?
out clearly. The handbook. You have to. so you can have that time to say, hey, I told you.
We talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
But you can't,
Well, and-
hey, you can't wear that. No, you never did
Right.
that. You're like, okay, well, you should have known.
It's on me.
Right.
It's on me.
Well, and by human nature, we're defensive.
Oh, 100%.
And so it's hard not to be like, well, you didn't communicate with me. I don't know that. If you don't tell me, I don't know that. Or for someone to call you. I mean, I can literally not be offended by what you're telling me, but because I'm a little bit embarrassed because you called me out, I'm going to find a way to have beef over it.
That's
time
me.
and place.
Yeah.
Time and place.
Right.
Like, no, I'm not going to grab my mic and be like, yo, Reagan, change.
Yeah,
Like, this
right.
is inappropriate.
And
Yeah.
again, I think that's why you, like you guys said, it's so important to have like relational equity with people to be able to communicate those things to them. Because if you're coming to me, I don't have that close relationship with you, and you're like, listen, your social media, like you're gonna have to. I'm gonna be like, bro, who are you? Right.
Right.
But because my leader,
You only care about me when I post something that you don't like.
Right. But because my leader is someone that pours into me and has relational equity with me and communicates with me and it checks in on me when I'm like suffering or struggling, and they talk to me about things that are not just controversial, then I'm going to receive it and be like, you know what? You were willing to hold me accountable even though it was uncomfortable for you, and I really appreciate that you were willing to do that with me.
And having that openness of, you call me out too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I try to tell people that.
Right.
Can I add one thing to that?
sure.
So also, if there's anybody that is watching this that is a worship leader and like learning or not learning, if you've been in this a long time, I also do think there's really something to be said for if you are a man and you have to tell a woman to wear something different, please, if there's any woman on your team that can do it, that comes off
Yeah.
much better.
Yeah,
And
that's
like,
something we've also talked about. Joel will be like, listen, you
I
and I'm
hey,
like,
I
you
had
know
to
what?
ask someone the other day. One of so her name's Holt. She's one of our worship pastors, and she's phenomenal. She's our creative pastor, like over everything. And I was like, can you have our conversation for me? Like, I need you to do this, because I had to have a conversation with a man, and then there was another conversation that had to happen with one of our young girls, and I was like, I need you to do this. It eliminates a lot of things up front.
Right.
Doesn't change the fact that it still is a hard conversation, but it
Right.
takes one element out of it that you don't have to worry
But
about.
you know what? In so many situations, and hopefully this is not, for you guys, but in so many situations, just because of the culture we live in, that conversation, if not received correctly, can turn into, well, this man told me what I can't wear.
That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
And both of you as men with husbands and children and families, with no care in the world for what these women wear on a day-to-day basis, because you have to protect the platform and you have to say something, they get to take it however they want, and they can say,
We have wives.
did I say husband?
You did say husbands. We do have wives.
They have wives. guys,
I thought about it, but I was gonna let it
Guys,
go.
they
We have
not
wives.
husbands.
In case people don't know what's.
Yeah.
We both have one wife.
So sorry. One wife.
Yeah, because then we said wives.
One each.
we both have one wife.
Yes. But anyway, because you guys have that commitment and they might not, for them they get to turn around and be like, oh, well, Will, watch out for Will because Will was telling me I couldn't wear this shirt. What's his problem that he was looking at me? And you're like, bro, I'm just trying to protect.
Will's trying to control
protect
the women on our team, and then
Right.
it turns into this whole thing.
Right.
I just think it exhibits a lot of wisdom to be able to ask a lady on your team to speak to the young women or older women. It doesn't have to be young.
Mm-hmm.
And then like me going into a man and be like, hey, can you change? Can you not
For
wear
sure.
that? I just
sure.
think that goes. Now, I think as men, especially if we are the person leading the team, like I'm the person running point for the Conway worship team, I need to be the one having conversations about attitude.
Right.
I think there's because that's
Right.
spiritual leadership.
And
Right.
also, back to the worship leaders, if you're meeting with a woman, do not pull her in a room and have
Ever.
that discussion.
Ever,
Talk
ever,
alone
ever.
is always the.
I hope that's
No doors need to be
clear.
shut, ever.
Yes, like,
No.
go in the auditorium somewhere away from people.
And
but
that's
be in the
something
open.
I value. Like our pastors have always modeled for us. If they have to meet with someone, they're like, "Oh, my wife's gonna come,"
Yeah.
or they'll do it
Right.
in the lobby in front. Like they're like, "We'll keep it private, but we're not gonna be alone." And I just think like
Don't put
proper
yourself in a
planning.
weird
Yeah, and like it's preventative planning, like doing things that protect you from not saying someone's gonna say something, but if they decide
don't
to,
know anymore.
you don't know.
You really don't.
And so. Like you guys said, talking to worship leaders, giving some of that like insight, and I value both of you guys kind of touching on this, but be willing to be corrected the same way you're willing to correct other people.
Absolutely.
And I think, we're in these groups on Facebook. I'm sure you're probably in some of these as well. Like worship leaders collective, like all these different groups on Facebook. And Joel and I, a lot of time, I'll see Joel commenting to other people, giving them great advice, and I'm like, period, like the comment. But I'm just in them. And a couple weeks ago, a guy was in one of these groups, and it just blew me away. He was talking about something. He was taking communion with his team backstage, and he was like, we're getting ready to go out, we're taking communion, and one of the old men on the team got mad at me for having my hat on. And he said, I think you should take your hat off. And I said, you know what, old man, this isn't the 1900s, so I'm going to keep my hat on. And
He posted that he said
yes.
that.
And he
thought
like
he was
saying
gonna
like,
be
oh,
like,
I
yeah.
Thought you ate.
right. Saying like, dishing it out to me. He was like, yeah. And then he rolled his eyes and asked me, could we talk later? And I was like, nah, not with that attitude. And he was like, what crazy stories do y'all have? And I was so proud. I opened the comments and everyone was like, what poor leadership. What a poor representation of Christ that was.
Right.
The fact that not only you spoke to him that way, but in a public forum, you're referring to a valued member of your team and church as this old man.
Yeah. it's
How
hard.
You have to have that
disrespectful.
heart, like, okay, if my hat causes you to wonder, like,
Well, yeah, I mean,
take it off.
if your eye
Guess what?
causes you to stumble, right?
I'm kind of in a whole thing right now where I'm like, I was reading through 1 Corinthians 11. I'm like, do I need to cut my hair off? I'm like, I'll do it. You know what I
Right.
mean?
I
Like,
cut my hair because it's really thick and it just goes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And when I wake up, sometimes it's like, but I think, that's hard. Like as leaders, if and I think you could take this the wrong way and really run with it. But like you said, if there's something that is causing one of my team members to be tripped up on, it's got to go. But I also think there need to be conversations. Like, let's have a theological conversation. I want to know your background
Right,
of
for
where,
sure.
why you think my hat's offensive. Now,
sure.
if it's like an offensive hat, that's
Right.
one thing,
For sure, for sure.
but like if just wearing it, like we need to talk about, because hey, that may not line up with, I can tell you at The Rock, that doesn't line up with our view of theology. Like theologically, we don't view it wrong. And so if you are going to serve in this body, it is, good to
you should
understand.
be biblically literate if you're leading.
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
it's like, and if you're gonna serve, you need to know that, like, I'm sorry if this is offensive to you. It's not. We do this here.
Right.
It's okay for you to wear a hat on stage, like, and that's the team you signed up to. You
Right.
said you wanted to serve on.
You read it,
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is just the willingness to conversate and not just shut down people's ideas, but also the willingness to be corrected. Because then, in the comments on this forum, I'm looking, people are like, you know what, dude, I'm honestly like, I think you need to pray over the situation. I think, and his responses to everyone were like, yeah, sure, LOL, like very sarcastic. And he ended up deleting the post. But it was just shocking to me. I was like, it's sad to see that a man who is leading in a church is having these conversations with his team. But then when other people were graciously trying to say, hey, man, listen, like, I just think that you could have handled this differently, his response was all sarcasm or more disrespect.
Right.
And that just shows a lack of willingness to be corrected. And the truth is, in any part of the body of Christ, if you don't have a willingness to accept accountability and criticism when you are wrong and be honest and open about being wrong, you can't lead.
Yeah.
And honestly, you can't serve. So I think that that's very important.
Yeah, that's good.
For sure. So that basically concludes our episode. I'm super grateful that you guys were willing to let me ask you all these questions, these uncomfortable questions. I'm sorry if you're sweating a little bit because I am.
I got warmer. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm a little hot
Just a little
right
bit.
now.
Yeah. Whenever we start talking about the expectations, it's like, okay, please don't bring up dress
With the
code.
lights, I'm
Yeah.
like,
So thank you guys so much for being willing to let me ask all these questions. If you want to plug anything, your platforms, anything like that, you're more than willing.
come visit The Rock.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, he just says, come visit Acoustic Christian Church.
Dub over me.
Dub over
Ecclesia
it.
Christian
Jump
Church.
over it.
Beside the cookout.
Beside
Either
Cookout.
church beside the cookout, really. Honestly, either one works.
Yeah. And there's also Aner Rock on 501. So any of
Yeah.
the 501 churches.
Any church on 501. Okay, so anyway, thank you guys for watching. We're super excited to be able to have these conversations, facilitate them, and continue to have conversations that will be resources for Gen Z and beneficial for other generations to be able to hear what we believe, why we believe what we believe, and what we can do about it. So thank you for listening. Thank you guys so much for being guests on this episode, and I will see you guys next time on Gen Z On. Be blessed.